In today's video, we're going to dive deeper into NVDA, which is breaching key Fibonacci zones. Is this a good place to be looking at NVIDIA for a buy the dip setup, or should we be waiting for a deeper pullback? That's the question I'm looking to answer in today's video. Let's start with the weekly time frame chart first, then I'll move on to the daily time frame, and then we'll move on to intraday time frames. Now, inside of NVIDIA, I've drawn a few Fibonacci levels which represent key retracement areas. These represent previous retracements inside of NVIDIA being projected from our current high price. Now, that gives us four key levels that I have on my chart. The first is 131.10, the second is 129.06, the third is 122.58, and the fourth is the lowest one near 102.82. To clean these levels up and make them, I think, a little bit more human readable, we can chalk up this first level, or rather a cluster, to 130. Then we have 122.50. And finally, we have essentially the $100 price mark. Now, so far, today, we're tagging very close to this 130 mark. And that's where I think you can look at for a shorter term buy the dip sort of setup here, where you're taking advantage of intraday volatility. For longer term volatility, the weekly time frame chart, which is the one where our trend is still very much intact, we have this bullish trend. We can see that our market stage is still in a market stage of acceleration. Our pullback area is closer towards that 122.50 mark. That represents not only our deeper Fibonacci pullback, but it also overlaps nicely with the weekly market pulse, and it overlaps, I think, nicely with where we would expect to find previous support. And there, I imagine you would find buyers waiting to essentially buy the dip here. That represents a very nice pullback area, a nearly, if we measure from our high, 20% pullback in a major stock that I think has been hyped by a lot of traders. So those are two key zones that I'm looking at for the shorter term. 130 for short-term trades, 122.50 for longer-term trades. Now we zoom into our daily time frame chart. On the daily time frame, we can see that we have a squeeze that's building, and so far it feels like that squeeze will fire to the bearish side. We also see this market pulse has transitioned to a market stage of deceleration. Now, before we get carried away with thinking that this is a big bearish downside inside of NVIDIA, I think it's important to study previous times that this has happened. Here we can see that previous times that the market pulse has transitioned, yes, we have had a pullback, but they've been short-lived. So I'm not looking at this to be a deeper, longer pullback inside of NVIDIA, but rather trying to see if we can get a little bit greedier with a pullback as close to this 122.58 if we can get it. If we break below that, then we do know that we have our lower levels below us at 102.82, but this gap is quite sizable that any stops really you'd want to take out below this, call it 122 area, giving it a little bit of room, but not letting it run much more than that. Now 130 feels like it's in play, and we might get an opportunity for some short-term volatility tomorrow morning. Now, the one thing that's interesting before we get into analyzing that volatility is today on the 1 hour time frame chart into the close final candle, we did see that first edge signal print. This is our custom overbought, oversold signal, and we're seeing this oversold signal, which is telling us that now we're starting to see signs of the sellers here exhausting. And you can also see the amount of wicks that we had here straight across the board, essentially holding 131. I think we'll break 131, and I'm looking at these lower levels, 129, 130, for where I'm looking for the entry. Now, in terms of how to pinpoint the exact level, that's where I think you can take advantage of intraday volatility with the Volatility Box model, specifically the Stock Volatility Box hourly models. In the morning here, that gives us some levels where we can have some buy the dip entry setups. Here's an example from today morning where price breaches our Volatility Box zones. The sign entry lines and below is where I'm looking at for an entry. And ideally, if we can get deeper into the clouds, that to me is preferred if we can get it. So if we can break inside of our Volatility Box levels, that tells us that, hey, we have a volatility edge that we can take advantage of. We also know we're inside of key Fibonacci levels, so that would give us yet another plus point for this particular trade. And I'd be looking at essentially taking advantage of a shorter term reversal, very similar to what we had today inside of NVIDIA. I hope you found today's video helpful for those of you looking to take advantage of this recent volatility inside of NVIDIA. A pullback to 122.50 would represent nearly a 20% pullback in a hype stock, and I think AI is very much here to stay, and this would be a good level both from a technical perspective along with just from a price pullback perspective, a discount from the highs in a very solid stock. Take care, everyone. Good luck trading, and I'll see you in our next update.